Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever.
Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective, and this is my co-host and practitioner, Shannon. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, so excited to be here yet again. I can't wait for today's topic too.
Today is a good one. And so today we're talking about gut health. And in case you did not see the title yet, we're talking about gut health. And I know we've done some very specific episodes already about, like SIBO and parasites. And today we're going to cover things a little differently. We're going to do kind of an overview of gut health and how digestion works and why it's a north to south process and some really basics when it comes to digestion. And then we're going to get into things like leaky gut and stool testing and what to do when you have overgrowth issues and how to test with different issues and why a stool test may not be the best option. And then we'll ruffle lots of feathers by sharing how we don't think the gut is the be all end all. Unlike many, many other people in the holistic health world and functional medicine world. And this is coming from our education and personal experience of that experience working with clients and why what we do works, why we've seen it work so much better, especially in the long run, than just seeing so many other practitioners. And both of us have worked with many other practitioners on our gut health, and there's a lot of things missed there. And this is why we do things differently in our practice. So we're going to talk all about that.
Yes, yeah. And I feel like in general, in the holistic health world, like we talk about or hear the term gut dysbiosis and leaky gut like all the time. And at this point, which we'll get further into it here, but it's almost like, yes, it means something, but it's almost like a blanket term because there's so many other moving pieces that are going on underneath that. And, of course, from like our own experiences and working with other practitioners and what we learned throughout our schooling and whatnot, there's a bigger piece to it here. And I think that's part of the problem in the like functional medicine world, holistic health world, whatever you want to call it, is people are only focusing on that and we're missing so much of what's going on underneath it.
Yeah, and they're really only focusing on one piece of gut health. They're focusing on the leaky gut, on, SIBO, candida, if you're really lucky, maybe parasites, and not looking at the bigger picture. And this is where it really changes for us. And this is where we're going to start with the basics of digestion because this is really important. And for us, when it comes to gut health, it's not only what is actually going on in the gut and with the immune system, but really the bigger question is how and why did this happen? And that is not usually just ate the wrong food and now we have all of these gut issues. This is a complicated question that has multiple pieces of it. And this is why we're going to start with the basics of digestion because if we don't look at all of these pieces all together, you're not going to heal and stay healed long term. And that is why recurrent gut issues are so prevalent and why people just have these things and recurrent issues and end up on elimination diets for years and years and years because the bigger picture of how and why did this happen is not addressed, and there are pieces that are missing. So let's start with digestion, and let's talk about why digestion is really a north to south process and what this looks like.
Yeah, so so north to south process, we're thinking that, not thinking. So we know digestion actually starts in the brain here. So we can smell food, our body's giving us cues that we're hungry, then our mouth is going to start to produce saliva, which has enzymes in it to help break down food. So that's when we say north to south process and it's starting like in your brain, that's pretty much what we mean by that. I would say the second biggest piece or the second thing that's happening here has to do with our stomach acid, which is super, super important. And this is like a big piece that we really get confused. And it's not anyone's fault. It's just kind of the way that we've been taught things, which is not 100% accurate. So when it comes to stomach acid, people think that stomach acid is bad. We don't want it. We don't need it. It causes problems like heartburn and acid reflux. And it's actually quite the opposite. So that is like our first protective barrier to pathogens, parasites, bacteria, anything that's like on your food that maybe you don't want your gut to inhibit. And of course, like digesting, breaking down your food, breaking down proteins, all the things. Stomach acid does all of this for our body. So it's super important. And it's actually, I'm just going to throw this in there. I know we won't go far into it, but when we have low stomach acid, this is actually one of the indicators of like acid reflux and whatnot. So what's happening there is we're eating our food, we don't have enough stomach acid, and things are starting to get pushed back up because it's not being broken down and headed south in that north to south process. So, I mean, stomach acid is like a really big role here, and it's very easy for our stomach acid to get lowered. Just general, how things are in society. Like we're exposed to lots of toxins. We're a high stress society. Both of those things lower our stomach acid. Alcohol consumption, another super common one, really lowers our stomach acid. Certain medications can lower it. If you're sick with something else going on, that can lower it. So there's many different things that can lower our stomach acid. So this is like a big one and an easy one to replace and get back to normal.
Yeah, and just I want to dive a little bit deeper into these first couple pieces, because if these first couple pieces aren't super on point, everything else goes wrong. So just to dig a little bit deeper. So digestion starts in the brain. And a big piece of this is if your body is in a state of trauma, fight, flight, freeze, your body is not in a place to digest food. And just to give a super easy example to think about, and I'm sure I've shared this before because I feel like I've talked about this example all the time with clients anytime we talk about this, but let's say way back in the day, you're being chased by a predator, a tiger, and you're running away, and you're in this like literally flying away, flight response away from the tiger because you're in real danger. It's not going to be beneficial for you to stop, pause, eat a snack, and then continue on. Like that's not that beneficial. That's not beneficial for survival. And once again, our body doesn't quite understand the difference of being chased by a tiger and you being under a constant load of stress, being stuck in fight, flight, and or freeze all of the time. And this isn't to say you have to be perfect and be in this wonderful, like peaceful place every time you eat, because obviously that's not realistic. However, a few big things that you can do, when you are going to eat as much as you can, and once again, I know this isn't always possible, but like sit down and actually eat and just focus on eating. No TV, don't be running around. Try not to eat in the car, rushing around. And if you need help getting out of that sympathetic fight or flight, freeze kind of state, taking a few deep breaths. So inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth, and make that exhale just a tiny bit longer than the inhale. And that's going to bring your body back into more of a parasympathetic, relaxed state, which is automatically going to prepare your body to digest food. So like number one thing, don't be running around. Try and do your best to be in a little bit more of a relaxed state anytime you go to. The next defense. Oh, sorry. Did you have something you want to say?
I was just going to say rest and digest. That's like, just keep reminding yourself of that.
Exactly. Rest and digest. Like that's what a parasympathetic state is, a rest and digested kind of state. So do your best to get there as much as possible, and you will see improvements in digestion and just, kind of going back to the stomach acid piece, when we're in that sympathetic, being chased for, flight, freeze response, our stomach acid levels are automatically going to go down. And this is another really big piece of it. You can't have the most optimal digestion if you are in a constant state of stress. And this is a big reason why we focus on nervous system regulation or in our practice, because we know it impacts everything, including digestion, including gut health, including like your ability to absorb nutrients and break down your food, off everything. So number one, get into a relaxed state.
Mhm.
Number two, next we get into our, so and this is also really important, chew your food. So digestion, and when we talk about like breaking down our food, that really starts on our mouth. And if you actually chew your food, and what we learned was chew 30 to 40 times, no one wants
No
to
one does
count.
that.
Yeah, no one wants that. Let's be real here. So like try and chew your food to the consistency of a smoothie, give or but spend some time chewing your food. Avoid liquids with your meals because that's going to play a big role in you just like taking a couple bites, swinging down a liquid, swallowing your food without properly chewing it. You're going to eat a lot faster, which is also not great. Take your time, breathe, relax, rest, digest. All of these things play a super big role. So try not to drink liquids, try and slow down, really try and chew your food. And this is the initial piece of breaking down our food. And here's the biggest thing, and we're going to get here, and I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but leaky gut, when we talk about leaky gut, a lot of that has to do with our food not being properly broken down by the time it gets to our small intestine. And a big way to avoid that or prevent it again is, once again, focus on north to south. And chewing your food makes a really big difference. I'll also say, if you're having like a smoothie or something liquid, even mimicking chewing will help produce stomach acid and other digestive enzymes. Like the chewing piece is really important. So please chew your food. And everyone can chew your food. And I know if you're used to eating in 5 minutes, if you've got a busy life, that fast eating can be valuable. And, if you don't want to have gut issues long term, chew your food, please. And it goes a really long way.
Yeah, I mean, so two things. If you're slowing down and taking the time to chew more, you're only making it easier on your stomach, essentially, because it's going to make it easier for your stomach acid to help digest your food and whatnot. Second thing, I cannot tell you how many people, like, this is, of course, one of the first things that we talk about before we even dive into like anything bigger when working with new clients. When we get people to like take 5 minutes, take a couple deep breaths, slow down before you're eating, the amount of people that come back and say, wow, like I haven't done anything but that, and I notice that like my bloating is better. It's because you're actually slowing down to chew your food and you're helping your body get in that rest and digest state. And also the food, we won't go too far into this, but the food fear thing, the elimination diets, this also plays into this, because if you're having that stress and that fear about like being nervous about what you're eating or trying to find something to eat and already like getting your body worked up, you're already in that stress mode. You're already setting your body up for more of a struggle to digest your food. So that's also an important piece too, is just that the entire slowing down relaxation portion.
Exactly. And we do get a lot of people that come to us with a lot of food fears, who have been put on restrictive diets by other practitioners or put themselves on these things, and then come to us. And, one of the tools that we'll often recommend is doing a little bit of affirmation work or even a gratitude practice before you go into eating. And a gratitude practice, this is scientifically proven, it makes a difference. And what our brain thinks, and helping to change what our brain thinks, goes a really long way. So, if you fall into this category, something like, I'm grateful for this food that is going to help nourish and fuel my body, and and it's going to help my body feel good and feel strong and feel energized. If you're not used to it, I know it can sound silly, and I'll tell you from a lot of experience, it works. So once again, I may be silly in your eyes if you've never tried it, and I would very much encourage you and invite you to try it if you fall into this category, because it does make a really, really big difference. And even, we'll see people go on vacation, even within the US, and going to Europe is a different ballgame in different parts of the world, different. But even within here in the US, people will be like, my digestion was really good and I felt great. My bloating was down. And it's just because of the stress, because they weren't as stressed and they got to enjoy themselves. And maybe they even ate worse and maybe lost weight. And it was really just the stress factor of this. So this plays such a big role. A couple other things about stomach acid I just want to mention. And we'll put this in the show notes, but a very simple test to look at, and look, it's not perfect, however, it's pretty good. It's called a baking soda test. And this test is super, just really valuable and so simple and accessible. And it helps us determine a little bit more as to where are your stomach acid levels. Are they normal? Are they on the lower end? Are they on the higher end? And over 90% of people who have acid reflux and heartburn issues, it's low stomach acid, not high stomach acid. So yes, you could fall into the category of high stomach acid, and the likelihood that you do is slim. I think I've seen one person ever have high stomach acid issues, and they didn't even have symptoms. So it's very unusual and very rare that you will have high stomach acid issues, even with acid reflux and or heart.
I've never come across a client who's had high stomach acid.
Yeah,
so that's how rare
unusual.
it is.
The other thing I want to say about this is, for stomach acid to be produced, we have to have protein. Protein stimulates stomach acid production, and this is why when we talk about anything nutrition, gut related, it's almost always one of the first things we talk about is protein intake. And this is why, because one, most people are not getting enough protein, especially women. And look, it is hard as someone who was like in the bodybuilding community and doing like 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. I've eaten and I've gotten to over 200 grams of protein in a day. And it's so hard to do it the quote unquote the right way, from mostly whole foods and not focusing on a lot of junk food. I get it, and it is also so important, especially as you age, especially as women age. We need that protein intake for a variety of reasons, including really helping with that stomach acid production. And this is why almost always across the board, we are recommending eat your protein first for stomach acid production, for overall digestion, for feeling fuller, faster, for having more energy, for more stable blood sugar. And I know there's a whole book out there that says don't eat your protein first for blood sugar regulation. And I've seen amazing results. We've seen amazing results in this practice doing it this way for many, many, many years. I'm not saying it's wrong or the science is wrong. And, we have experience in a different way. So that is the way that we generally recommend. So protein intake is so important. And you need protein every single meal. Every single meal, you need protein. Eat your protein. Get your protein. We do prefer animal-based protein. And we also do work with clients who don't eat meat or animal-based products that fall into the vegetarian, vegan kind of camp. And it is more challenging. Yes, you can absolutely do it. We support people for whatever reason that they feel like it, specifically moral reasons. We totally understand. And you just have to put in extra effort to do this. And if you have an aversion to meat and it is not a moral aversion, you might have low stomach acid issues from not eating enough protein for long enough, and your body has a very, very hard time breaking it down. So you might feel gassy, you might feel bloated, you might feel just like really heavy and really uncomfortable. And it's because
Constipated.
constipated. You went so long with not getting enough protein that your stomach acid levels are super low. And that's playing a massive, massive role in your ability to digest the protein. So just for reference, if that sounds like you, I would take this baking soda test and the stomach acid test to kind of see where you land and recognize that this may also be playing a role in your aversion to animal-based products if it's not moral.
Yeah, and just to touch on the vegan vegetarian portion too, like Megan said, it is possible. It's not our favorite. It's for sure going to be more difficult. And then you're also adding a step on of certain foods that you're eating. There's a specific way that they need to be prepared as far as being soaked and sprouted to make sure you're actually getting the nutrients from the food at that point. So it's just, it's a lot more work. I don't know that I've seen anyone who could reach that goal of that high of protein regardless, but we do get it, especially when the moral reasons are behind it and whatnot. And then the other thing is I know I've mentioned this before in previous podcasts, but the Why Stomach Acid is Good for You book is a really great starting point if you're listening to us and you're like, what the heck are they talking about? Like, I've never heard this before. I highly recommend that book, and we'll put it in the show notes too, but it gives a pretty in-depth breakdown of, I would say, all the things we're talking about and why stomach acid is so important, like things that we didn't even mention here.
Yeah. And if I also want to just mention this, if you're on a PPI and you're taking something to block stomach acid production, the chances that you're going to develop a gut overgrowth issue currently or sometime in the future, it goes up drastically. And I will also caution you, do not just willy-nilly get off that kind of medication. For reference, we have a whole protocol that we use if someone is coming to us on a PPI and they are interested in working with us and their physician to transition off of that medication. And it's usually a several month process. So I really just want to be clear about that. Like, do not just stop your medication. Do not just stop any medication. But this is a really big one not to just stop, because there's a lot of things that can be impacting your stomach acid levels, the acid reflux, the heartburn, and we need to really look at that and slowly start to adjust, modify, transition, and support your body through that.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of takes us into two other important parts of the digestion north to south process, and that's going to be your liver and your gallbladder. Well, let me back up a little bit first. So I want to talk about the pancreas, just because that plays such a big role with the digestion enzymes that the body produces. So yes, we have some that are being produced in the saliva, which we talked about earlier, but your pancreas is also producing a specific fluid that contains a handful of different enzymes to help you break down your food. And I would say, I'll just talk about the main three ones. So the main three things are going to be protein, fat, and carbohydrates. So there's going to be protease, which is an enzyme to break down protein. Lipase is an enzyme to break down fat. And amylase is a enzyme to break down starches, carbohydrates. So this is also a really important piece. In the pancreas, that's kind of like the role that it plays in digestion, is producing these enzymes. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. All right. So, and then the next thing where I was going with the medication thing is the liver and the gallbladder here. So we've talked about this before too. Like when we're taking certain medications, anything like NSAIDs, anti-inflammatories, PPIs, these things are not only reducing your stomach acid, they're also playing a role on your liver in kind of making your liver, God, we just talked about this before. Eclipse going on. I'm doing a parasite cleanse right now. I can tell that my words are so easily mumble jumbled, so bear with me here. But so when it comes to the liver, those are also things that are playing a role in your liver struggling, which is going to mean that your digestion is going to have an impact from that too. So specifically when we're talking about the liver, it's going to produce bile, which is stored and released from the gallbladder. And what bile is doing is it's essentially aiding in fat digestion, absorption. It's also helping remove toxins. That's like a really big role of bile flow. Those are the main parts of bile. And again, very, very important piece here, especially the toxin portion of this.
This is so underrated. The liver. I know. Every episode we're so in love with the liver. And for really good reason, because the liver does so much. And the liver, any medication, any supplement you're on, like the liver is processing that out. It helps to regulate blood sugar. It produces the bile that's then stored in the gallbladder. And, the gallbladder is one of those poor little organs that just sometimes does need to be taken out and is also real willy-nilly taken out when maybe it doesn't need to be. And, we've been very fortunate and able to save many a gallbladder in our practice, which is always great. I know that's not always the case, and sometimes it is the case. And there's a lot that can go wrong here. If I remember this, and I was pretty young. I was on the younger side when this was a big thing, but I very much remember it of the low-fat diet. If you have ever done a low-fat diet, if you are currently doing a lower-fat diet, your poor liver and gallbladder, it's not producing enough bile. The bile can sit in the gallbladder and get stale. Bile ducts can start to have issues, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong here. And I'll tell you that bile flow, bile production is one of the most common things that we see issues with in our practice. And one of those big markers on blood work in a metabolic panel, which once again, this is a very standard panel, is bilirubin. And this is a great indication of bile flow, bile duct health, bile production, all of these things. It's not the only one. It's not the be all end all. And it for almost everyone, it's low. And then when you've got a lot of issues, oftentimes we'll see it pretty. This is a really big deal. And if you do not have a gallbladder, this is a massive, massive issue. Please go check out TikTok in particular, because I've done a lot of content around this. But now you no longer have a place to store your bile. So it'll be produced, and then bile can just like be in your body. And oftentimes physicians will put you on a medication that'll help soak up the excess bile, so you're not having diarrhea all of the time, which is the most common things that happens when you don't have a gallbladder anymore. And now we're further impeding digestion because now we're not getting any bile to help break down stones. And this is really important if you have, if your stool floats, if it's yellow or orange, green, white, these are often indications of a bile issue, of a liver and or gallbladder issue when it comes to the bile. This is one of the reasons why we love coffee enemas, because if someone has a lot of stale bile duct issues, we love it for the liver too, but coffee enemas, I know they're aggressive for a lot of us. We do them. We love them. They're not so aggressive.
I just did one this morning.
Yes.
Perfect timing to talk about it.
There we go. So, but a coffee enema is such a valuable tool if you have bile flow issues. And, we've worked with enough clients at this point that don't have a gallbladder that, one, you need to be on something to help support that. And you need to take that with every single meal that you eat, a source of fat, which really could be every single thing. And this is something you're forever on. There is no changing this. And this is just so important and so undervalued. And yes, you can take supplements for it, but we need to figure out the bigger root causes as to why you're not producing enough bile. And a lot of times this does go back to where are we eating enough fat? Are we not eating enough fat? Where's that fat coming from and the sources of that? But this is a really, really, really big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because, if you don't have a gallbladder and you're running to the bathroom, having loose stools after every meal that you eat, God, there's so many. Yeah, you got to be taking ox bile or something to replace the function of what your gallbladder does. I mean, people don't share this with you, but given what we just explained, think about it. You're removing that entire function and all the roles that your gallbladder played in your body. So it's like extremely important that you add that supplement in. And I think there's like maybe 2 other supplements we would maybe suggest that you take for like the rest of your life. And this is one of them. Like it's just one of those things that, and you'll see massive improvements with it too. Like if you're someone who's coming in and you don't have a gallbladder, normally, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, normally we start to like rebuild and support the gut more towards the end of the process. But this is one thing, like we're doing it right up front because we need that function in your body to actually function.
Exactly. And the other thing, I was going somewhere and I forgot, and I had to loop back around, and now I remembered it. Once again, it is full on eclipse season as of today, as of the recording of this. And by the time it comes out, it'll probably be over. But I have never seen someone come in that does not have a gallbladder that also now, assuming it's been more than 6 months since their surgery, which we don't usually see, unfortunately. We don't usually see people right after they have surgery. It's usually when the issues start to arise a few months later that we start to see months of issues and, people reach out to us. But if you don't have a gallbladder anymore, this is a lot of pressure on the liver, and the likelihood that you're going to end up with a toxin overload issue if you're not properly supporting your body is astronomical. I've never seen anyone come in to our practice that does not have a gallbladder that also does not have a pretty significant toxin overload issue, let alone gut overgrowth and all kinds of other dysfunction going on. But the bile plays a really, as Shannon mentioned, like really, really big role in helping move toxins out of our body. And we're putting a lot of pressure on the liver without that gallbladder. So this is really important to understand that, yes, I understand the surgery is required a lot of times. And it's really, really important that we properly support our body afterwards and for the rest of our lives to make sure that we don't end up with a lot of dysfunction going on, because that's exactly what will happen. Our organs are necessary, and removing one makes a big difference. For me, I don't really care which one it is, but removing any of them is a big deal.
Yeah, I know. Even when it comes to like in before I even say this, we understand that situations are different for every person, but just like how easy people are to remove tonsils and whatnot, like just think about it. Every single part of your body has a function. It was meant to be there.
So at this point in our body, this is where most of the food has been broken down or should be broken down at this point. And we're getting ready. We've got a couple other things that go on, but now we're really getting into our foods going into our small intestine. And once again, at this point, our food should be completely broken down. We should not have like big food particles. There should not be pathogens here, assuming everything's going right. Like everything should be broken down, because what happens in the small intestine here, and we're gonna segue right into leaky gut, because this flows out very, very well here. In that, in our small intestine, what happens is basically it's a separation of nutrients that are ready to be absorbed into our body, kind of pass through our small intestine and go out to our bloodstream to be doing all the jobs that they have to do. And then anything that is not needed goes down through our small intestine into our large intestine, getting ready for waste or for it to be recycled. Like water, some water is reabsorbed, bile is reabsorbed and recirculated. There's things that are reabsorbed and recirculated, and that happens more so in the lower part of our digestion. But we should be at a good point here where it should be smooth sailing. And I know that is not the case for the vast majority of people.
Yeah. Yeah, if that's happening. If you don't have leaky gut, then yes, you should be looking pretty good. But when you do have leaky gut, so essentially, I feel like the best way to describe it is when we think about our intestines, and if you're watching the video, you can see this, but if not, I'll try and explain it. So when we're putting our hands together, and they're really close. There's no gaps in between. Nothing can get through. When we have leaky gut, you separate them a little bit and you start to see like these holes within your hands, okay? Or where your fingers are locking. This is like a representation of leaky gut. And that's where things like toxins that should be coming out through like bowel movements at that point can start to filter into your bloodstream, into your system, and cause other issues. Same with undigested food particles and whatnot. They're now going through or passing through the intestines into the bloodstream outside of your intestines where they should not be. And then you start to see a downfall of reactions here. I mean, this can look like, honestly, it can look like a lot of different things. It can look like different GI issues, like, bloating, I would say, is a big one. Cramping, histamine issues. Like, there's so many different ways that leaky gut can present itself.
Food sensitivity is also a really big one. And here's the thing, if food particles are getting out, and most people eat similar foods most of the time. And, if you have leaky gut and these junctions are more open than they should be and allowing food particles out, if you're eating similar things and these food particles are getting out, what's going to happen is these things should not be in your bloodstream. So now your immune system is going to respond because there's a supposed threat going on, and your immune system is going to start attacking these food particles. So now every time you start eating this food, guess what's going to happen? Your body's going to start to attack it. And it's not necessarily the food itself, but it's the fact that these things are getting out. Probably they're not digested properly. And then they're getting out into the bloodstream, and now your immune system is attacking them. And now we're having food reactions, food sensitivity issues. You might have gas, issues with constipation and or loose stool or just irregular bowel movements, all of these things. Mm-hmm. And leaky gut is talked about so much. And so many practitioners they just start by healing the small intestine. And once again, if you haven't addressed anything above that, you can, use all that L-glutamine, aloe, slippery elm, all of these herbs that are quote unquote heal leaky gut. You can use all of these that you would like. And yes, we do use these in our practice, but way, way, way down the road. Then it's going to come right back. You're going to end up with the same issues. This is why people have, do same thing like elimination diets. Like you do, let's say you diagnose IBS, you want a low FODMAP diet for 1 to 6 months, depending on who you talk to and what they recommend starting with. And then you try to reintroduce these foods, and you still have the pathogens. You have maybe addressed your leaky gut, but then you haven't addressed anything beforehand, so you're not actually digesting your food, and you're ending up right back in leaky gut. These food particles are still coming out. Like, this is where the issues come up, and this is why people like quote unquote heal leaky gut, and try the L-glutamine, try the aloe, try the slippery elm, try these different herbs, and they might feel better temporarily because you're band-aiding, let's say you have a giant wound and you're band-aiding it, it's going to feel a little bit better. And then that band-aid's going to fall right off because you have this giant wound and you haven't addressed anything, the rest of the wound, you haven't sewed it up or done anything to heal it, which is everything north of the small intestine when it comes to digestion, let alone pathogens, which we will talk about here too. And so now we're back in the same place. And what was the even point of, doing an elimination diet, trying to use a handful of herbs and spending money and time trying to heal your leaky gut when you're going to end up right back in the same place if you haven't addressed everything else.
Mm-hmm. And this is also why we don't love food sensitivity testing. So when you have leaky gut, you could be reacting to different foods on any given different day because your body is so inflamed at that point. And like Megan said, your immune system is responding because it thinks that, whatever you're putting in your mouth is a threat. And it doesn't necessarily have to be these like 1 or 2 foods. So the problem is when we get something like a food sensitivity test, we're just causing more stress on the body because for most people, you're going to have a handful of things. Like I would say at least like 6 to 10. I've seen people with more than that, which, that's stressful because now your body's already stressed out trying to figure out like, okay, well, what can I eat now? What do I have to avoid? And then, like we said, everything's digestion starts in the brain. So the whole process. So that's one of the reasons why we don't love food sensitivity testing. When it comes to food in leaky gut, I truthfully feel that if you are interested or feel like you're reacting to foods, start with the major things like gluten, dairy, corn, soy. I would say those are probably the 4 major things. And honestly, like the biggest 2 that we deal with are probably removing gluten and dairy. And a lot of people don't even have to do that to feel better. Some people definitely need it. Not everyone needs it. But that's the basic place that I would start when it comes to eliminating foods.
Yeah, and well, let's throw sugar in there too. And sugar is a little bit of a double-edged sword because it can also be pathogens too, which can exacerbate symptoms. And, if you're interested in doing an elimination diet, we're not big fans. Eliminating one food, quote unquote, more inflammatory food can be beneficial. Gluten and dairy, probably the 2 most common ones that we see, and then you have the cross reactants and soy, there's a whole list. Gluten and dairy, probably not a bad place to start if you're going to start somewhere. If you really want to follow something specific, a paleo, if a Whole30, if not a terrible idea for like 30 days. No
Um,
more than,
yes. And I don't know if you saw the updates on this, Megan, so I'm just going to mention it. I'll say the old version of Whole30. Okay.
yeah, so I
So,
have recently seen, and same thing with paleo. Old Whole30, old paleo that really focuses on whole foods. And that's really it. Focuses on whole foods, eliminates a lot of like processed sugars, processed foods in general, processed wheat, processed dairy, things like that, yeah, can definitely be more inflammatory. And I'll say, for me, I don't follow a strict diet or strict way of eating. I'm paleo-ish, probably is like the closest. And if you see like on Instagram, on stories, I do share, recipes on things that I'm making and cooking and eating and all that kind of stuff. And you'll notice almost always they are from a paleo because that is easy for me. It's focused on whole foods. I don't do gluten. I don't feel good when I personally eat gluten. I do substitutes for a lot of dairy-based products. I have cheese here and there. But by and large, I'm not using that. Sometimes I go hit or miss on the eggs. If I go too hard on the eggs, usually my skin reacts. But if I do eggs a little bit here and there, I'm usually okay. So it really depends on the person, and your food sensitivities will change. When you are more, and I'll give you the example. When I am stressed, I will react to more foods. I will start to react to nightshades and, even like really good, like sheep or goat's milk based cheeses that typically I tend to do pretty fine with. And just like some random things that'll start to react to. And that's because my body is stressed. And my north to south digestion is not working optimally. And when it is, I don't have these food reactions. And it's not about leaky gut. It's not about, I just react to these foods. No, it's about the state of my body and where my body is, where my stomach levels are, what my liver is doing, what it's trying to handle, where nutrient status is. All of that kind of stuff makes a really big difference. So yeah, we're not big fans of food sensitivity testing. If you want to spend $100 to $400 on one, if you're really passionate about spending that kind of money on a test, like there are way better tests that, and we will talk about it. I actually don't know if we'll get to it in this episode because I think we're going to have to do a part 2 because we have a lot more to cover. But we will talk about testing, and once again, I don't know if we'll get to it, but even GI or stool testing in general, we're not the biggest fans. So yeah, anything else on leaky gut, food sensitivities?
no, I say, I mean, just kind of spinning off that into our next topic, which is things like oh, go
I
ahead.
just remembered one other thing here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, if you're going to do an elimination diet, like a paleo, like a Whole30, or any of the other, dozens of elimination diets out there, let's be real here, there should be a reintroductory process. And this is actually really important. And I think a lot of pride, and once again, I'm speaking from experience here of I've been put on a bunch of elimination diets without any real plan to reintroduce or try to reintroduce food. So the reintroductory process is really big and important in how we do this. So really, it should be one food at a time. You shouldn't go from elimination diet to I'm eating whatever, which is why it's really important not to do long-term elimination diets, because we've all been there and you're just hungry, you want good food, just like give me all of it, which we're not really understanding what our body needs or what our body's actually reacting to. So one food at a time. The way that we generally recommend is start with a small amount one day, wait 2 days. On that third day, have double that amount, wait another couple days. Big fan of journaling here. After you eat that thing and what you feel, look at gut health, look at energy, look at sleep, cognition, inflammation, pain, like all of those things. And food reactions can show up in all of that. For me, with eggs, I don't react anywhere except my skin. My skin will just start to break out. With gluten, it's actually not my gut that I'll notice at first. It's like brain fog, trouble concentrating, trouble focusing, recall. It really affects my brain first and foremost. Yeah, I usually have like a little bit of constipation or maybe a little bit of bloating, but by and large, my reaction is cognitive in nature. And I'm not willing to not have a clear brain. I lived with that for too long to go back to that, which is why for me, I'm really strict, no gluten.
Yeah, for me, it's so crazy how it affects everyone so differently, but the brain fog definitely, and then my joints. I immediately feel it in my joints. Specifically, my hands get really sore, but again, not everyone has that reaction. And the whole point of waiting that time frame, that 2 days, trying a little bit, then waiting a couple days, adding more in, is you have to see, if your goal is to find what specific food is reacting, you have to do it in an individual way like that, which is a commitment, especially if you're trying out lots of different foods. There are other methods. I'm thinking of the pulse test in my head, which I do think that is valuable in certain cases. Again, that's another one that takes a lot of time. I don't know if there's a specific name for it. So if you're interested, you might just want to Google pulse test, because I don't remember the actual name. But yeah, there's a handful of different things that you can also try before even jumping into paying, $400 some for food sensitivity testing.
Yeah. And if you've got a gut overgrowth issue and, the northern part of that is all out of whack, you're going to continue to have food sensitivities. Our gut is always changing and evolving based on where the rest of our body is. And so it's really important to understand that not everything starts in the gut and not everything ends in the gut. Yes, the gut is important. And there's a lot of other things that are really, really important here to understand and to address. And which, once again, this is why we need to look at the bigger picture here to understand and to heal and, once again, stay healed long term, which is, hopefully that's the goal.
Yeah, that's always end goal hopefully for most people, like you said. But so when we have something going on like leaky gut, we already know that our system isn't functioning properly, or else we wouldn't have got leaky gut in the first place. So now you're susceptible to other things happening in the gut, like candida overgrowth, different fungal infections, different bacterial imbalances going on. And I think where people get stumped is that we tend to target these things only and treat them as a root cause issue to what's going on, when that's not always the case. Because we've had a lot of experience, personal and with clients. People come in and we're only working on these things. We're only targeting the fungal overgrowth. We're only targeting the SIBO, the bacterial stuff, feel better for a little while, and then it comes back. And it's because we have other co-infections going on. When we have one of these things going on in the body, they kind of feed off of each other, especially with parasites. They're literally feeding on toxins and other toxic imbalances going on in your body. So when we're missing this part and only targeting these two things that everyone talks about all the time, we're not truly healing the gut in the body.
Exactly. And, when we talk about yeast and fungal issues, and really any of these things, when we talk about bacteria, and I do want to touch on H. pylori because I think that is a valuable thing to touch on too that we haven't talked about. We do have an episode on SIBO, so definitely go back, listen to that. We have a whole episode on parasites. Definitely go back and listen to that. And these yeast and fungal issues. So really when we have an overgrowth, when we have dysbiosis, when we have an infection or an overgrowth issue, it's not that we shouldn't have these things in our body. It's usually that these things are in a place that they shouldn't be. If we think about SIBO, so like SIBO's in the small intestine, where bacteria shouldn't be. It should be in the large intestine, and it's overgrown, usually from low stomach acid, like many other things, that it ends up there where it shouldn't be. Same thing, H. pylori. It's an overgrowth of bacteria in the stomach, which it shouldn't be there. It should be, that stomach acid production should kill it, and it should not be there. And so this is a really big issue. And then same thing like yeast and fungal issues. We have yeast and fungus in the body. We have parasites in the body. And it's not a big deal. It's supposed to be there unless it's in a place or in an amount where it's not good for the body and the body is now no longer able to handle it, and it's in excess of what the body can handle. And yeast and fungal issues in particular are a really big issue, and common things: oral thrush, white coating on your tongue, certainly like yeast infections, BV, UTIs can all be related to this. Skin issues, fungus on your nails. These are all very, very common symptoms, along with obviously gut issues in general, bloating, gas, constipation, and stool. But yeast and fungal issues in particular can be very dangerous for the body because they're also releasing toxins into the body when they are in excess. And this is where the GI map test and stool testing in general really aggravates me for people who are properly trained in how to read and interpret this and understand the bigger picture here, because yeast and fungal issues often will not show up in stool. Like, it takes a long time for them to show up in stool. However, they will show up in urine a lot faster, and we can see a lot more when it comes to not only the levels of these issues, but also the toxins that they release. We're able to see that in urine a whole lot better, which once again, and I know we mentioned this in the mold one of the many mold episodes.
Mold
the
four, I don't know.
Yeah. Of the organic acids test, which is a urine test. And the whole first section of this test covers yeast, fungus, and a wide variety of bacteria. And there are fungal toxins in there. There are extra toxins in there, specifically in that first section. That's really important to understand. That are these things present in our body? At what levels are they present? And then, obviously it's important to understand that they are there and we address them. Bigger picture, why and how did they get there in this excess? And for yeast and fungal issues, if you haven't looked at mold, that needs to be ruled out. Number one, it has to be ruled out, because mold and yeast and fungus, they all like to commingle with each other.
Yeah, and that OAT test is, honestly, there's just so many benefits from the OAT test. We can see so many different things. So, like, again, there's lots of different testing out there. If you're considering getting some type of functional testing done that's not blood work, that would be like our number one recommendation, especially if you're dealing with any of those yeast symptoms. And I will add vaginal itching to that list, because you don't necessarily have to be having like chronic yeast infections, and you can still have, the other issues going on, like the white coated tongue, the vaginal itching and whatnot. Yeah, so there's lots of different moving parts here. And if you're coming in with some of these like fungal issues, maybe it's a bacterial thing, we can see some of these patterns in blood work. Like there's definitely some bacterial patterns and whatnot, something for yeast and fungus, better seen in an O test than looking at blood work. Not that we can't see like inflammation patterns and that there's something going on, but sometimes we can't pinpoint exactly what that something is. And that's where this O test comes in handy.
Exactly. And another symptom that I forgot to mention that's really huge is dandruff. If you have dandruff, chronic dandruff issues, there's a really good chance that you've got some yeast and or fungal issues going on here. And, I know there's like an anti-candida diet, which not a fan. And if you look at this, once again, these things are releasing toxins into the body. And if you are only trying to kill or get these things back into a manageable place, your body's now been exposed to pretty heavy levels of toxins, pretty likely, let alone everything else we're normally exposed to, let alone, once again, like why, how did it get there? What are our stomach acid levels doing? What's our, bile and pancreatic enzymes? Bigger picture, we need to look at that bigger picture. And that's so, so, so important. And if you have gut issues, if you've got mental health issues, if you are struggling with weight loss, if you're struggling with cognitive issues, these things are all, energy, chronic fatigue. An organic acids test it's 77 markers for reference. If you have not listened to that mold episode where I talked about the organic acids test, it's 77 markers. It's a lot, and it has so many different sections. It has a whole section on detoxification and nutrients and neurotransmitter pathways, and we look. There's one really important marker that talks about neurotoxins, and that's a really big deal that not enough people are concerned about, because that marker is also on one of the Dutch tests, and one of the more comprehensive Dutch tests, which is a hormone test. And I've seen too many practitioners dismiss that being high, which blows my mind and just tells me that they're not properly trained in any of these tests, because this is a really big red flag. And neurotoxins in the brain is so big and so important, and very, very common when it comes to yeast and fungal issues, which then impact your mental and emotional health and your cognitive health. And so all of this stuff is just so important. And once again, it's not only looking and figuring out what are all of these things going on, more importantly, why and how, bigger picture, how did we get here, and what big picture needs to be addressed, and then how can we slowly kind of work in to make sure the body is healing, but once again, more importantly, stay healed long term, and has the systems set up to work the most optimal to make sure we stay in the best position health-wise possible.
Yes. And one thing I want to add to that is that, again, going back to elimination diet specifically for like SIBO and candida and whatnot, I have never seen a person be able to, I'm doing air quotes right now, quote unquote, heal these issues by just removing foods and doing an elimination diet. There's many moving pieces to this, but I'll say one big thing is when you start to remove these foods and starve these certain things in your body, you will most likely have some type of like die-off reaction, and that loops back to always starting with opening up your drainage pathways, because if that's not open, all of these things are going to float back around in your system and just hang out there and cause other issues. And typically we have co-infections going on, and removing food isn't going to help get rid of the co-infection. So specific elimination diets for candida, I will say our personal opinion, it's not solely going to work for this.
And here's the thing. These things, when you do these elimination diets, the pathogens are gonna hide. And then they have these protective little barriers, they're like protective bubble called biofilms that, look, medications don't touch. If you're using a biofilm disruptor from in a supplement form, usually great. And once again, these things can hide if we're doing these really strict elimination diets that, look, once again, we're just focusing on this one pathogen, but we're not focusing on the bigger picture of why and how this got here in the first place and looking at all of that. And I think that's probably where we should stop, because I do think we have enough for a second episode, just based on our outline here, and just talk about, okay, well, let's look at the bigger picture. How do we address the bigger picture? And I know we touched a bit on this pretty quick in some other episodes, but I think it's worthwhile to take the time to really go deep into this, because this is really important. And yeah, I'll just say, we've worked with so many people who have come to us, working with other practitioners who have just focused, and we've experienced this too, of just focusing on the bacteria, on the yeast, on the fungus, if you're really lucky, parasites.
Yeah.
And I get, it's very frustrating for me. There's a couple people out there that cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. There's one program that I remember specifically, and I don't even remember the name of the woman. I believe it's a woman who runs this program, but it's $3,000 for SIBO, healing SIBO for 3 months, which doesn't include the $400 to $600 of supplements per month that you also have to buy on top of that actual $3,000. And I get so frustrated, because clearly this person doesn't truly understand, the full scope of gut issues, gut overgrowth issues, and the fact that you can't just look at one thing. You can't just kill this one thing and everything's going to be better, and then just, kill it for a month or two and then add in the probiotics. Like, there's a lot more that goes into this. And this is why, for me, 5+ SIBO protocols, even multiple parasite protocols that didn't work, didn't really do anything. I just get so frustrated with this, and, people wasting so much time and so much money by not looking at the bigger picture. So if that sounds like you, if you've already done that, I'm sorry. I've been there. It sucks. I know. And there is a better way to do this. And, for me, in building this practice, building programs that were affordable, offering discounts on supplements, very reasonable costs for testing, was so important to me, because I spent so much money. Shannon, I know you spent so much money. I know Brett spent so much money. Like, we all spent so much money, let alone time and energy, and, the impact on our mental and emotional health and our nervous system, all these other things that it has impacted. So if that sounds like you, yes, you can be frustrated, you can be sad, you can be angry. All of the feelings are welcome, and understand you're not alone, and you're also not doomed to be that way forever. And make sure to stay tuned for part 2, where we're going to talk about how to actually heal from these and what to actually do, and the process that we've used very, very successfully to heal ourselves and hundreds of clients at this point. And once again, healed and staying healed. Super, super important.
Yes, yeah. I can't wait for part 2. I think everyone's going to find that part, fairly fascinating, and yeah, you'll get a lot of information from it so that they can try and use for themselves, or, of course, always reach out, book a consult. We go over, we love looking at people's blood work on consults. That's always our first choice, and it's a good starting point, even just to get some information for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And we will look at other testing too. If you've already had that done, we will absolutely look at that other testing too, going into a consult. And we can also, just talk through symptoms and make some recommendations based on that too, because by and large, symptoms are pretty similar, and we got a pretty good guess, just based on your symptoms, what is going on here. So thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow. Any 5-star reviews mean so much to us. So it resonates. We very much appreciate it. And be sure to stay tuned in to our episode next week.
Yeah, awesome. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.